So, hello, I'm Marie-Claire de Mattia, Universidade de Coimbra, and thank you for having me. My communications title is The Corpo-realities of Ata Aidoo's Literature. So, as Michel Foucault explains in Ir Surveiller et Punir, the body is possibly one of the first dimensions of subjectivity hit by the so-called microphysics of power, microphysique du pouvoir, which consists in a huge set of dispositions, strategies, tactics that in turn might be more or less evident, violent, or straightforward. The aim of all of this is making the subjects, us, docile bodies, corps docile, that is, through our bodies making us pliable to external conditioning, subjugated, usable, disposed to being transformed and eventually perfectioned. In Jane the Trouble, Judith Butler retakes into consideration an aspect Foucault had left behind in his formulation of the power microphysics, that is, the individual's world power. Unlike Foucault, Butler sees the body as an interactive medium and a positive elastic boundary. Our bodily identities preserve the right of resistance to the societal dictates by doing, by concrete actions and postures. The only way to overcome the bindings of the community is acting, performing, and by performing the phenomenalizing of myself through my objective correlative, I produce a resounding effect on the other's consciousness. Performativity consists then of a rematerialization of the identity. I rethink myself according to new coordinates and to new laws. This is a corpo-reality then, a conjugation of identity, body and action in the immediacy of the hic and nunc of the now and here, as if my being was a persistent exhibition. It is my phenomenal manifestation overcoming any nominal interpretation of my being. The body then becomes a center of manifold possibilities and perspectives, and consequently acquires plenty of new determinations. My body is persistent and ever-changing work of art. It is a provocation dropped in the face of any possible beholder. It is a political declaration. It is an assertion of strength and independence. So, what can the female body be, and how can the female body be? This is the starting point of the Ghanaian author, poet, playwright, and academic Ata Aidoo. She was born in Southport in the central region of Ghana in 1942, that is, during a time of research on British neocolonialism. She adopts the corpo-reality of her female characters as a thermometer of change in the African woman condition and a laboratory to develop and propose new attitudes and positionings of the Ghanaian woman in relation to the phallocratic, phallocentric social and cultural background of a country. Also, those female black bodies come to the literary scene as both a provocation and a political declaration. In fact, through her writing, Aidoo formally and decidedly gives a counter-response to the fact that African literature is male-created, male-oriented, chauvinistic art, and on a role of our literary giants clearly proves this point. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Senghor, Soyinka, Achebe, and Falil and others, as written by Femi Ojoade. That is, Aidoo contradicts the dull representation of women in African literature and revolutionizes the panorama by formulating strongly willed, decided, proactive and sexually free women who do not adhere anymore to cliches. A very powerful figure represented by the words of Aidoo is Anoa, the main character of the homonymous play, written by the author in 1969. She is unusually beautiful. She listens to her own tales, as quoted. She listens to her own tales, laughs at her own jokes and follows her own advice. Also, Anoa's corpo-reality is meticulously described by the notes in the play as, and here I quote again, wearing a cloth wrapped around her, the upper part of her breasts are visible and also of her legs. She's lean and slight of build. End of quote. This implies that she's conscious and shamelessly proud of her physical appearance. Later on, in a dialogue between the protagonist and Kofi Ako, a Jesuit husband, she's said to be a small, strong woman, resistant to the bite of anger as well to extreme climates, to drowsiness as much as exhaustion, apparently even to illnesses. As she recalls, here I quote, "My mother has often told me that except for normal fevers, my body has never known real illness." End of quote. Her bodily features astonish Kofi, who cannot help exclaiming that, quote, Anoa, you ought to have been born a man." The protagonist funnels her manly physical resources and iron will into her job. She and Kofi trade animal skins from one village to the other, which she does with passion and enthusiasm. Her corpo-reality is reactive and proactive. Her endless energies and resilience helped Kofi lay the foundations of his future economic success, a feature which distinguishes her from any other woman in her position. Everything about Anoa is about producing, making, doing. Never an interruption or a delay in the process, not even the acceptation of being substituted in her work to let her finally enjoy the privileges of her new economic status. A true entrepreneur, she feels fully realized only when active. As she says, "I cannot be happy if I'm going to stop working. How can a human being rest all the time? I cannot. I shall not know what to do with myself as each day breaks." End of quote. Anoa is a femina femme who wants to affirm herself in the real big word. She does not accept to conform to the societal rules which want her confined to the spaces and roles of domesticity. Let the other women do if they will. She aims at transcending the ordinary, doing what she feels she was born to. Such an existence determines her physical estrangement and a continual movement from one place to the other. So at first, feeling rejected and insulted by her mother and father, Anoa decides to abandon not only her family home, but even her native village. After that, the only remaining solution is legitimating her existence in peripheral spaces, the highways and the roads of connection between one village, town or city and another, or along the coast to deal with the European traders arrived to the African shores. The highways or roads on which she and Kofi travel are not hindered by the ideological constructs of the village or home which confine women into certain specific roles, thus letting Anoa negotiate gender and class relations to the point of reaching a de facto equality with Kofi. This condition of parity falls apart towards the conclusion of a play. Kofi has succeeded in forcing Anoa to abandon her work, and they now live in a huge, richly furnished house, together with their adoptive children and with their many, many slaves. The forced inactivity and the captivity within the domestic walls drive Anoa insane, while her body has aged prematurely. Her dynamism was also an incentive to keep herself tidy and in a good shape. Now that she is a prisoner of her own dwelling, she is reduced to a shadow of her ancient self. What pains her most is her childlessness. Her failure at motherhood is the ghost that most savagely haunts her since the beginning of her marriage with Kofi. The doctors accuse her of being too hyperactive and goal-oriented. They say her, I quote, "There is nothing wrong with your womb, but your soul is too restless. You always seem to be looking for things, and that prevents your blood from settling." She is told that she works too much, that she is a witch, that she has a devilish soul, even that she is possessed by supernatural beings. For a long time, she plies herself guilty, sustaining that she is, as she says, not woman enough, or that she is doomed with the condition of the wayfarer who exists just for the sake of existing without ever fitting in, until a final epiphany. It is not her who is unable to get pregnant. Rather, she realizes that the barrenness of the couple is a shared responsibility rather than the fault of one person only. This discovery partly relieves the protagonist of the misery, but provokes the side effect of destroying Kofi Ako, who will shoot himself out of humiliation. Completely alone, childless, and willing to go back to her parents' land, Anoa has no other choice but to take to the extreme level her estrangement from reality. She then opts for taking her own life, an act which reconfirms once more the independence of her will and the full mastery of her own bodily self. The other female corpo-reality I will focus on is Aziz, one of the main characters of a novel Changes, a Love Story, published in 1991 and awarded the Commonwealth Prize for Literature in Africa in 1992. The femininity Aziz Seki embodies is the most modern of Aidoo's works. She drinks alcohol in private as much as in public. She has adopted birth control methods since the birth of her first and only child, Oginawa, as we come to know through the viewpoint of Oko, Aziz's husband. And this is because she doesn't want to be considered just and only as a reproductive machine, as developed by Etzraga, by using, and here I quote, by using birth control methods, as it rejects obligatory motherhood and moves to control a body. Modernity, implied in Western education and science, gives the African woman the tools needed to control her body. It is act in controlling her reproductive capacities that her culture believes belong to her husband, challenges her society's philosophy of marriage for procreation, end of quote. One daughter is sufficient to satisfy her desire for motherhood and to let her go on with her life, with her profession, and with her personal ambitions. Like Anoa, Aziz said countless times to love her job, to feel herself highly realized, if not directly happy, when she participates in the reunions of her department, or where she joins national and international conferences, or even when she brings home with her some work to do. As Aidoo writes, Aziz definitely put her career well above any duties she owed as a wife. End of quote. All of these is indicative of how Hazy's own self is her only certainty and her long-time established term of reference in relation with the rest of the world. Hers are the life and the corporeality which are at stake, and she's not willing to sacrifice her integrity to satisfy the desires of her husband or the oppressions exerted by the patriarchal and phallocratic society she lives in. The point break is the violence Aziz suffers at the hands of her husband, an occurrence which momentarily nullifies Aziz, who is at the same time physically present and absent in her reluctant, impotent passivity. The event painfully erases the casual, serene sense of integrity or corporeality and momentarily wipes her personality out too. When Aziz comes back to her senses, the realization of what she just suffered and her ability to call it by its name, marital rape. Yet, alongside this epiphany, a recognition, Ghanaian society or any other African society does not have a name for and thus does not recognize the existence, the painful factuality of marital rape, since, as Aidoo writes, sex is something a husband claims from his wife as his right, anytime and at his convenience. Besides, any sane person, especially sane women, would consider any woman lucky or talented or both who can make her husband lose his head like that. Being thus impossible for her to publicly shame Uncle for his deed, Azy opts for divorcing him in silence, eventually hoping that her traumatized self will regain its sense of unity. Her initial decision is of keeping clear boundaries between her and other men, that is, avoiding a remarriage for, according to what she says, here I quote, another husband to sit on my back all 24 hours of the day, the same arguments about where a woman's place is, another husband to whine all day about how I love my work more than him. I couldn't. Thank you very much. End of quote. The meeting of Ali and Day, though, changes everything. The two will quickly get closer and start a passionate affair characterized not only by a deep romantic bond, but also by their pulsing sexuality and the unstoppable craving each of them as for the other, reiterated and literally materialized in the descriptions of their sexual relations. These scenes are not only aimed at depicting the chemistry between Azy and Ali, but also stress the active participation of women into intercourse and highlight the fact that women too can be, and actually are, sexual beings with desires and sexual appetites, which Azy enjoys without shame, as Aidoo writes. Moreover, thanks to Ali and through his eyes, we see how Azy manages to get back her free and thoughtless way of living a corpo-reality. One meaningful episode is pretty much at the beginning of their relationship, as is represented whilst walking naked in the room after lovemaking, and Ali discreetly peeps at her. Ali's reflections about these are meaningful. Aidoo writes, he knew very few women from his part of the world who even tried to be at ease with their own bodies. The combination of forces against that had been too overwhelming. Traditional shyness and contempt for the biology of women, Islamic suppressive ideas about women, English Victorian prudery and French hypocrisy imported by the colonizers. End of quotation. By walking around naked, observed not only by Ali but also by us voyeuristic readers, Azy merges with the surrounding environment and gets rid of the negative influence of traditional, cultural and religious bias. The plain display of her corporeality reconfirms the appeasement and the full acceptation of her bodiness in spite of both the exterior, aesthetical and moral criteria usually transmitted by and in society. A moment of utmost vulnerability paradoxically turns into the show of Azy's major strength, that is her decisive nature and freedom from and resilience against societal dictates. By walking around naked, she succeeds at normalizing feminine nudity and sensuousness in a context where the biology of women is stigmatized or blamed, where women tend to be seen and are taught to be seen themselves, to see themselves as well as weapons, threats to the mental and bodily balance of men and of society, thus destined to conceal themselves, to act modestly, to hide behind a mask of shyness to be repressed. Unfortunately, this miraculously balanced and spicy love story will not last long. By the end of the novel, Azy's relationship with Ali will deteriorate to the point where, as Aidoo writes, they became just good friends who find it convenient once in a while to fall into bed and make love. Her love for her job and restlessness will not change, yet broken dreams will force her to reformulate her expectations and retune her whole life according to her newly acquired wisdom. At the same time, society does not prove able to keep up with a woman like Azy and her needs, thus determining her isolation. Anouar and Azy were formulated under the best premises, yet the conclusions of their stories are never positive, nor their desires are fully satisfied. On the contrary, they end up disappointed, disillusioned, deeply sad, although never embittered nor rancorous. Since they are the positively connotated, strong, proud heroines of their stories, they give us a consistent lesson of dignity and moral fibre. The clash between their unusual, at some point even revolutionary attitudes, and the postures maintained by their native communities is extremely violent, yet they go on following the path they drew with their actions and with their way of interpreting their corporeality and the space they were allocated within society. Their dynamism creates a fissure in the prevailing biopolitics, giving a pretext to put it into question. The unhappy ending of Anouar and Azy's trajectories demonstrate how the Ghanaian woman is still weighted down by the cumbersome totality of beliefs, postures, traditions, and viewpoints about femininity held by the Ghanaian system, and at the same time they constitute a possible model to follow, or not, being a crossover between the literary and the social experiment. Indirectly, through them, Aidoo wants to stimulate us readers to give an original answer to the question, what can the woman be? How can we reinterpret and redefine the concept of feminine corporeality? And not less important, how can the reinterpretation of the feminine body can contribute to the radical change of society, culture, and tradition? Thank you very much.